It began, like many great Hollywood stories, with two stars destined for the spotlight, and one movie that was never made. The late 1970s were the golden years of Hollywood's macho energy. Muscle, attitude, and charisma ruled the box office. But behind the bright lights, egos often clashed louder than any explosion on screen. And few rivalries captured that tension better than the long-standing feud between Sylvester Stallone and Richard Gere. Two men who represented completely different versions of masculinity. Stallone was the working-class brawler who fought his way from the streets to superstardom. Gere was the charming, introspective leading man, more velvet than steel. When the two collided during the filming of The Lords of Flatbush in 1974, sparks flew. Not the kind that light up a movie set, but the kind that burn bridges. What began as a minor on-set disagreement would spiral into decades of whispers, public shade, and one of Hollywood's most quietly persistent rivalries. This is the story of how ego, fame, and power tore two rising stars apart, and how neither ever forgot it. The setting: Hollywood's new breed of men. The 1970s were changing everything about fame. Gone were the days of clean-cut charm and studio-trained politeness. Audiences wanted authenticity, raw emotion, imperfection, and grit. Stallone embodied that shift. His breakout role in Rocky turned him into the symbol of the self-made hero, a man who had fought his way through rejection to create his own destiny. Richard Gere, on the other hand, represented the opposite pole of male stardom. He was trained in theater, effortlessly elegant, with a quiet magnetism that didn't need muscle to command a scene. Gere's sensuality and subtlety were redefining masculinity, just as Stallone's intensity was redefining toughness. When both men were cast together early in their careers, the chemistry on screen was electric, but the chemistry off-screen was combustible. The Lords of Flatbush, the spark that started it all. In 1974, a low-budget film called The Lords of Flatbush brought together several young, hungry actors, including Sylvester Stallone, Henry Winkler, Perry King, and a then-unknown Richard Gere. The movie was supposed to capture the rebellious spirit of 1950s Brooklyn street life. Stallone was already shaping his tough guy image, while Gere was still a rising star, eager to prove himself. According to crew members, tension began almost immediately. Gere, method and serious, approached his role with intensity. Stallone, who valued camaraderie and realism, thought Gere was trying too hard to dominate the set. The friction escalated quickly, reportedly reaching a boiling point during a scene involving fake fighting and physical posturing. But the breaking point came off camera. One day, during lunch on set, Stallone and Gere shared a car ride. Gere brought along a chicken sandwich dripping with grease and sauce. As Stallone later recalled, Gere's sandwich allegedly spilled onto his pants, and what followed became Hollywood legend. "He elbows me in the side with this greasy chicken," Stallone once said in an interview, "and I said, 'This is going to be a problem.' He said, 'Oh, don't worry about it.' I said, 'You just ruined my pants.' Next thing I know, there's a scuffle. Whether it was about the sandwich or simmering egos, the damage was done. Gere was removed from the film shortly after and replaced by Perry King. The two men never spoke again, and what could have been a forgettable moment turned into a decades-long feud. The rise, success, power, and parallel paths. After The Lords of Flatbush, both men took dramatically different paths, but both became icons. Stallone wrote and starred in Rocky just 2 years later, becoming a global sensation. He followed it with Rambo, Cobra, and Demolition Man, becoming the face of raw, blue-collar American heroism. His characters didn't just fight villains, they fought fate itself. Meanwhile, Richard Gere's career blossomed in another direction. His role in American Gigolo, 1980, made him a symbol of sophistication and sensual confidence. While Stallone represented sweat and steel, Gere embodied silk and seduction. An officer and a gentleman and pretty woman cemented him as the romantic ideal of the modern man, graceful, emotional, and untouchable. They were two sides of the same coin, both adored, both powerful, both in control. Yet their paths never crossed again. Hollywood insiders claimed that producers often avoided pairing them on projects because the tension wasn't worth it. Neither publicly reached out, and neither publicly forgave. The feud had become a quiet wall between two of the biggest names in the industry. The rumor that wouldn't die. In the 1980s, as both men's fame reached stratospheric levels, a cruel rumor began to circulate about Richard Gere, one that became one of Hollywood's most infamous urban legends. While no one knew where it came from, it spread like wildfire. Stallone was later accused by some of having helped fuel it, though he always denied starting it. In interviews decades later, Stallone admitted he had heard the rumor, but claimed he wasn't responsible for spreading it. For Gere, the damage was profound. The rumor followed him for years, damaging his reputation and distracting from his career. Many believe this moment cemented the divide forever, a private resentment that no apology could undo. Whether Stallone played any real part in it or not, the tension between the two became a cautionary tale in Hollywood about how powerful egos and public perception could destroy relationships overnight. Fame, power, and the ego machine. What made their feud endure wasn't just personal animosity. It was what they represented. Stallone and Gere weren't just two actors. They were archetypes in a changing Hollywood landscape. Stallone was the product of grit, an artist who had written his own destiny. Gere was the product of grace, the man who seemed to have everything without breaking a sweat. In a town built on image, that difference mattered. Hollywood thrives on competition, and the 1980s were the height of ego-driven stardom. Box office rankings were battles. Magazine covers were trophies. Every film was a war for dominance, not just over audiences, but over identity. Both men were powerful enough to shape the industry in their image. But the more power they gained, the less room there was for reconciliation. Even their filmographies seemed to duel with each other. Rocky versus An Officer and a Gentleman, Rambo versus Pretty Woman. Stallone made audiences believe in survival. Gere made them believe in romance. Their success stories didn't just define two careers. They defined the split personality of Hollywood itself. Brawn versus beauty. Action versus allure. Fight versus finesse. The years of silence. For decades, neither man publicly extended an olive branch. In interviews, Stallone occasionally brought up the incident, half jokingly, half resentfully. Gere, for his part, chose silence, a move that said more than words ever could. But Hollywood never forgets. Every time their names appeared in the same headline, journalists would resurrect the story. In the 1990s and 2000s, their careers evolved. Stallone leaned into nostalgia, reviving Rocky and Rambo, while Gere transitioned into more spiritual, introspective films like The Mothman Prophecies and Arbitrage. Time softened their images, but not necessarily their feelings. When asked about Gere in later interviews, Stallone once said, "He's not my kind of guy." Gere, when asked about the feud, simply responded, "That was a long time ago." Still, there was a quiet dignity in their distance. Unlike modern celebrity feuds played out on social media, Theirs remained private, personal, even old-fashioned. It wasn't about Twitter wars or public statements. It was about pride. What the feud really revealed. Both men became symbols of different paths to fame. Stallone through struggle, Gere through sophistication. They built empires not just on talent, but on the control of their image. And when those empires clashed, there was no referee, just decades of silence and speculation. But what's most fascinating isn't the anger that kept them apart. It's the grace that came with time. As both men aged, they focused less on rivalry and more on legacy. Stallone found redemption through his later roles, mentoring younger actors, producing, and returning to his roots as a storyteller. Gere turned his fame toward humanitarian work and Buddhism, shifting away from the industry's chaos. They both, in their own ways, found peace. Just not with each other. Every Hollywood feud says something about the era that birthed it. The Stallone-Gear divide reminds us that fame isn't just about fortune. It's about survival. Both men were victims and beneficiaries of the same system. One that rewards dominance but punishes vulnerability. Their rivalry became a mirror of an industry obsessed with image, where being the alpha was worth more than being authentic. In the end, the feud between Sylvester Stallone and Richard Gere isn't just a tale of bruised egos. It's a story about Hollywood itself. A world where power defines relationships and pride can outlive even fame. What began as a small clash on a forgotten film set became a legend, not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. Behind every headline and every rumor, there were two men chasing greatness in their own ways. Both found it, but at a cost. And maybe that's the real lesson. In a business built on larger-than-life personas, sometimes the hardest battle isn't on screen, it's learning when to let go. Because in Hollywood, grudges age just as slowly as legends.